Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're stepping into the art world, guided by Roger Kimball and his Arts Prospect. We've got a really interesting mix of excerpts.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Some are Kimball's critiques on modern art and, the whole museum scene.
Right.
Then others, they take us through art history, like his essays on Van Gogh,
The
Gauguin.
greats, Matisse, Picasso, even some contrasting viewpoints, which I always find interesting.
Absolutely. Clement Greenberg, Rosalind Krauss,
Yeah,
both champions of the avant-garde. So it's like we're getting into the heart of it.
definitely. Getting into Kimball's perspective.
Exactly. What makes good art, in his view? Let's dive in.
Well, one of the first things that struck me is how Kimball sees the shift in the role of art museums. He talks about them moving from these temples of art.
Right, these hallowed halls.
Exactly, to what he calls cultural factories. And he uses Mass MoCA as a prime example. It's in this industrial setting.
I've been there, yeah.
And they're all about expanding and redefining art.
It's almost a contradiction, right? A factory that's churning out culture.
Exactly. And that's where it gets interesting. That whole idea of art as this pure aesthetic experience shifting toward cultural production.
Yeah.
That's key to understanding Kimball's criticisms. He sees a lot of modern art as, well, prioritizing shock value, making political statements.
Instead of focusing on beauty, craftsmanship, those more traditional values,
Precisely.
he's pretty direct about it with artists like Matthew Barney, Karen Finley.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. He doesn't see much artistic merit in their work.
So it's not just about being new or shocking for Kimball, right?
Mhm.
There needs to be a depth there, a real substance.
You got it. Now, to be fair, Kimball does acknowledge that good art is being made today.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. What troubles him is the attention that's given to the outrageous, this feeling that museums are chasing spectacle over substance.
You mean like blockbuster exhibitions that are more about the hype than the art itself?
Yeah. Precisely. He sees it in those big retrospectives of artists like Andy Warhol, Francis Bacon. He even questions whether they deserve to be called geniuses. It's like, are they really that innovative, or are they just really good at grabbing attention?
So it's more than just a difference in taste. He's questioning the whole system of how we value art.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how often he compares contemporary art to those old masters, Velázquez, Rembrandt. He's looking for that lineage, that connection that seems to be missing.
And he has his favorites, right? He really admires Odd Nerdrum, William Bailey.
He does. It's like he sees them as upholding those traditions of beauty and skill that have been, maybe pushed aside in pursuit of the avant-garde.
But then he admires Clement Greenberg, a champion of abstract expressionism. Isn't that a bit contradictory?
It's more that he appreciates Greenberg's discerning eye. Even though he championed this movement that broke from tradition, Greenberg still had standards. He didn't just embrace everything labeled as avant-garde.
So it's about having a critical eye, regardless of the movement. But then we have Rosalind Krauss, who actually criticizes Greenberg. She seems to embrace the avant-garde wholeheartedly, even the aspects that Kimball finds, let's say, distasteful.
Absolutely. And those contrasting views really highlight the subjectivity of it all, right? The debate about modernism versus traditional forms is still very much alive.
Oh, totally. And Kimball weighs right into it, especially with his critique of the Barnes Foundation. Remember that part?
How could I forget?
He's pretty critical of the push to make it more, commercial.
It's that tension between preserving an individual's vision for art and making it accessible to a wider audience.
I was really struck by the story of the Barnes Foundation and its founder's dedication to making art accessible to, as he put it, plain people.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes you wonder, who gets to decide what's considered good art? Is it just this reflection of elitism?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It reminds us that art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's shaped by critics, institutions, money, the whole cultural landscape.
Speaking of critics shaping our understanding, I found Kimball's essay on Paul Gauguin really fascinating, especially how he presented Gauguin's rejection of Impressionism.
Oh, yes. That's where we start to get a sense of what Kimball means by good art. He talks about how Gauguin rejected what he called the shackles of verisimilitude.
So Impressionism, with its focus on capturing a fleeting moment, it wasn't enough for Gauguin. He wanted to express something deeper, more than just what he saw on the surface.
Exactly. And that's where his fascination with what was considered primitive art comes in.
Right. He saw something raw and spiritual in those art forms, something he felt was missing in the modern world.
It was almost like he was searching for the soul of art, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And Kimball points out how complex that whole idea of the primitive is as a source of artistic inspiration.
It can be problematic for sure.
But for Gauguin, it led to some of his most powerful work,
Absolutely.
like The Vision After the Sermon. It's such a departure from what other European artists were doing at the time.
Those bold colors, the flattened perspective, it's like he's deliberately breaking the rules.
Exactly. And Kimball recognizes that innovation. But he's also honest about the controversies surrounding Gauguin's life, especially his relationships with those young Tahitian women.
Yeah, you can't separate the art from the artist entirely, can you? It's complex.
It is. Brilliance and flaws often coexist. Judging art, just like judging life, it requires nuance.
It does.
But let's shift gears from Gauguin, who sought that spiritual connection in his art, to another artist Kimball covers, Vincent van Gogh. He grappled with a different kind of intensity.
Oh, absolutely. Van Gogh, he's often romanticized, right? The tormented artist, the passion.
And you can feel that in his work.
You really can. But what's interesting is that Kimball, even with an artist as revered as Van Gogh, he's willing to critique.
He talks about going to a Van Gogh exhibit and finding many of the works to be second or third rate.
He doesn't mince words.
He doesn't. But then he points to Wheatfield with Crows as this incredibly poignant piece. What is it about that painting?
It's that rawness, that raw emotion. It's like you can feel the energy, the desperation in every brushstroke.
It's haunting.
It is.
Yeah.
But Kimball seems wary of the almost cult-like adoration surrounding Van Gogh, urging us to look beyond the romanticized image and engage with the work itself on its own merits.
Which can be hard, right? Certain artists, they have this aura about them.
For sure. But ultimately, the art has to stand on its own. That's been a recurring theme for me throughout this whole exploration of Kimball's perspective.
Absolutely. And it's something that Kimball emphasizes again and again. He wants us to engage on a deeper level, look beyond the surface, grapple with the ideas and emotions that the art evokes.
Think critically.
Yes, don't just accept what you're told. Form your own opinions.
Exactly. And that's what I appreciate about his writing. He's not afraid to challenge us, to make us think.
He's a great example of how engaging with art can be this stimulating, thought-provoking experience.
It shouldn't be intimidating. It should be a conversation.
Absolutely. And we're back, diving deeper into Roger Kimball's arts prospect. We've been focusing on Kimball's views on specific artists, but now I'm curious about his take on those broader movements, especially the avant-garde.
Oh, it's a complicated relationship for sure.
It sounds like it.
Kimball, he admires that early 20th century avant-garde, that drive to innovate, to experiment.
To shake things up.
Exactly. But he's also critical of how, I don't know, predictable it's become.
Very bankable. How so?
Well, in trying so hard to be shocking, to break boundaries, the avant-garde has, in a way, become part of the establishment. Almost commercialized, you could say.
So it's like this weird paradox, right? It's set out to challenge the system, but it's become part of the system.
Exactly. And Kimball talks about how, having basically conquered the mainstream art world, the avant-garde has lost that edge, that ability to truly challenge anything.
He even uses the word senility at one point.
Strong words. But it shows how strongly he feels about what he sees as this decline.
And he's not just talking about some obscure corner of the art world, right? He calls the Whitney Biennial
Oh, I remember that.
a festering biopsy of American cultural pathology.
Yeah, he holds nothing back. And it's not just the Whitney. He sees this trend everywhere. The Turner Prize, artists like Gilbert and George.
He really goes after them, doesn't he?
He does not hold back, calls them drunken pornographers posing as moralists.
Wow.
But it's more than just him disliking their work. He sees it as a symptom of this bigger cultural shift, a kind of nihilism that he thinks has, infected the art world.
That's a pretty bleak outlook.
It is, but here's the thing. Even though Kimball's critical of what he sees as the excesses, the emptiness of so much of the avant-garde, he's still drawn to artists who are working outside the mainstream.
Artists who are challenging the status quo in their own way.
Exactly. It's like he's looking for those who are pushing boundaries, but without buying into the whole spectacle of it all.
So it's about authenticity, maybe.
I think so. He seems to have a real soft spot for artists like Odd Nerdrum and Tom Goldenberg.
What is it about their work that appeals to him?
Well, for one, they're both figurative painters in a time when abstraction and conceptual art are, the dominant forces.
So they're going against the grain.
In a way, yeah. Kimball admires their technical skill, their commitment to representing the world in a way that he finds, beautiful, meaningful. He calls Nerdrum one of the most brilliant figurative painters alive, and with Goldenberg, he sees those echoes of the masters like Titian, Chardin.
It's like he sees this direct line from those old masters to these contemporary artists who are keeping those traditions alive.
And that's what's so fascinating about Kimball's perspective. It brings us right back to that central tension, tradition versus innovation, upholding standards versus, forging a new path.
Which is something every artist has to grapple with, right?
Absolutely. It's at the core of any creative endeavor. And Kimball, he doesn't give us easy answers.
More like he's prodding us,
Right.
right? To think critically about art, to question our assumptions.
Exactly. He's not telling us what to think. He's giving us the tools to figure it out for ourselves. And that leads us to an artist whose work really embodies that tension, William Bailey.
Bailey, his work is incredible. Those quiet, still, contemplative paintings, they seem to exist outside of time,
They do. And Kimball picks up on that. He identifies Bailey as a realist, but acknowledges that there's nothing simply photographic or literal about his paintings. He calls him a draftsman of prodigious accomplishment. But accuracy is just the starting point for Bailey.
It's about what he does with it, right? There's something more there, beyond just technical skill.
Precisely. And I love how Kimball describes Bailey's nudes as still lifes in disguise. It's so perfect. It's like he's trying to find the essence of being, even in the human form, by stripping away all the unnecessary detail.
And that really resonates with Kimball, doesn't it? That sense of stripping away, of getting to the core of things.
Absolutely. He sees Bailey's work as this kind of antidote to the noise and chaos of the contemporary art world. He calls them oases of calm and contemplation in a world increasingly dominated by spectacle and sensation.
Oases of calm. That is perfect. It reminds us that art can be a refuge,
Yeah.
a place for thought, for quiet reflection.
It can, and that beauty, even in its simplest forms, is incredibly powerful. And speaking of finding beauty in those simple moments, Kimball's essay on Jean Dubrow.
Oh, his city six.
They're amazing, aren't they?
They really capture something about urban life, not just the energy, but also those quiet in-between moments.
Exactly. Kimball describes Dubrow as an artist who sees the world with this incredible clarity, capturing the light, the shadows, the textures in a way that's both realistic and, almost poetic. He compares him to Edward Hopper, Georges Seurat.
Interesting. So is that attention to light, to atmosphere, that ability to evoke a feeling.
Precisely. And it's fascinating how Kimball weaves together these threads, connecting artists across different periods, movements.
He helps you to see those connections, the influences, in a whole new way.
He really does, and that's part of what makes his writing so engaging. He's not just giving you his opinions, he's giving you the tools to form your own.
To see the art world with fresh eyes.
Right. He's inviting us to join the conversation.
It's like he's saying, look at this, consider this, what do you think?
Yes. And that's what makes him such a great guide, especially for those who might feel intimidated by art criticism. He's not afraid to have strong opinions, but he also really wants to share his love for art, his knowledge, with the reader.
It's a good reminder that engaging with art shouldn't be intimidating. It should be a conversation, a back and forth, a journey of discovery.
Exactly. And that journey can lead us in unexpected directions.
To artists we might not have discovered otherwise.
And sometimes it leads us back to the fundamentals, like with Kimball's essay on Graham Nixon and the New York Studio School.
The New York Studio School. It sounds like a place that's holding on to tradition in a world that's obsessed with the new and the now.
In a way, it is. Kimball's really drawn to their commitment to teaching the fundamentals of drawing, painting, skills that are often seen as, old-fashioned in the contemporary art world.
But they're the foundation, right?
They are, and Kimball sees the value in that. He talks about how the studio school encourages students to look to art history, the Renaissance, the masters for inspiration.
It's like that old apprentice system, isn't it?
It is, learning by doing, by observing. And Kimball, he sees a real value in that approach.
He talks about this exhibition at the studio school. The theme was bathers.
Oh, I remember reading about that. Works ranging from Cézanne and Degas to Valthus and Alex Katz. Quite a range.
Amazing. So many different styles, but all exploring this common human experience.
Exactly. And Kimball was really struck by a drawing by Graham Nixon himself. Bathers by the Pond, Dark Sky, Sagapanak. He describes it as having the feeling of tableau. Visual snapshots in which a procession of gestures is arrested in a distillation of significance.
He really has a way with words.
He does. But it speaks to that idea of capturing the essence of a moment. of distilling something down to its purest form.
Which seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of the art that Kimball admires.
It is, and you can really see it in Nick Rosen's work. It's deeply rooted in the tradition of figurative art, but there's also this freshness, this immediacy that feels very much of the moment.
It's like they're trying to create a space where art can be about something deeper, something beyond the shock value, the market trends.
A space for beauty, for meaning, for connection. And Kimball, he responds to that. He sees the studio school as this kind of beacon of hope in an art world that can feel very cynical, very superficial.
It's a reminder that the tradition is still alive.
It's not a museum piece. It's something that continues to inspire, to challenge, to nourish artists today.
And that's a powerful thought.
Well,
Really is.
yeah.
It speaks to this idea that's been at the heart of our whole deep dive into Kimball's perspective.
Right.
How do artists honor tradition while still pushing those creative boundaries?
Right. It's like this balancing act.
It is. And Kimball seems drawn to those artists who can draw on the past but create something truly new.
Not just copying what came before, but using it as a foundation to build something original.
Exactly. Something that speaks to the present moment. And that's what makes the art world so exciting, this constant dialogue between what's been done and what's possible.
It's always evolving, always changing.
It is. It makes me think of that T.S. Eliot quote, how tradition isn't static, It's constantly being reshaped by each generation of artists.
And that's what keeps it fresh, that sense of possibility.
Absolutely. Well, this deep dive into art's prospect has given us a lot to think about. Kimball really challenges us to look at art with new eyes.
To think about those bigger questions, what is art? FOR, what makes it good?
Exactly. And to really consider the forces that shape it, whether it's the market, the critics, or just the changing times.
It's a reminder that art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of the world. It reflects the world.
And it shapes the world. There's this one quote from Kimball that I keep coming back to. Art happens, however, to be a matter of self-evidence and feeling, and of the inferences of feeling rather than of intellection or information. And the reality of art is disclosed only in experience, not in reflection upon experience.
Wow.
I know, right?
It's powerful. It's like he's reminding us that art isn't just an intellectual exercise.
It's meant to be felt.
Experienced. You can analyze it all you want, but the true impact of art, it's visceral. It's in those moments when you let yourself be moved, challenged, even disturbed.
Exactly. So to our listener, go out and experience art for yourself. Don't be afraid to feel it, to let it challenge your perceptions.
Or let it surprise you. Let it open your mind to new possibilities.
And who knows? Maybe this deep dive will inspire you to create some art of your own.
Now that would be something.
It would.
Yeah.
Until next time, happy exploring.